everyone, it's Pastor Todd. Welcome to another Teaching Tuesday. Walking around Sunday morning. I shared my secret a couple of weeks ago about how I actually try to record these on Sundays. So it's right after the worship service and I'm recording these. The birds are going crazy. Y'all hear that? Those beautiful birds chirping. Getting a little walk in. It's supposed to be raining over the next several days here in Northwest Arkansas. It might even be raining on the day that you're watching this, but if it is, just look back at this video and remember how beautiful the sun is. I wanted to talk to you today about a word. Again, I use words to frame my Teaching Tuesday videos. You got to go with me here. This word is going to be a little bit on the nose, okay? So I apologize. But this word is contagious. Contagious. All right, Todd, where in the world are you going with this? Okay, I want you to go with me on this, okay? You know how this epidemic is really, or pandemic really, has changed everything, not just in our daily lives, but things that I see and things that I read. It's really changed how I look at those things. So I watch videos sometimes. We've tried to watch videos with the kids of videos of like point of view videos where people are on roller coasters. And so there'll be like videos of people waiting in line at rides on Disney World and whatever. And all I can think whenever I watch those videos is those people aren't physical distancing. Nobody's wearing masks. But of course, this is videos from years ago. So, but it's just funny how you see stuff like that on TV now. And you're like, the first thing I think about is, oh, they're not wearing a mask. Also stuff that I read where I never really thought about too much about it at one point, but now it makes a whole lot of sense. It's a little too real for me. I've been rereading this book by a guy named Malcolm Gladwell, who's a pretty popular author, I guess. And he wrote a book a couple years ago called Tipping Point. And it's really interesting. I started reading this book and I came across a section in the book where he actually talks about the early Methodists in the 18th and 19th century and how their movement spread. And there's a section in that book where he's talking about the tipping point. And the tipping point is the whole book really, but he's using all these different examples. But the tipping point, as he describes it, is that point in which an idea becomes a movement. So an idea gets enough traction with people and enough people buy into it that it actually takes off and it becomes contagious. He actually uses that language. He says that the best way to think about movements, whether it be social movements or even just things that become popular, a certain clothing line or a certain media platform, those can best be described as epidemics, he says, which is really interesting because that's all too real right now. But he uses that to even describe the early Methodists, that what they were doing can best be described as an epidemic where they believed so strongly in the message, and the message had so much impact on the people around them that it couldn't help but spread. And I think about that as we're enduring these days of the quarantine and the virus spreading and all that stuff. Because in some ways, it's this very ironic picture of what it is to be the church. That we have a movement that should be, and we have a belief that should be as contagious as this coronavirus is. That whenever we get around other people, they can't help but be infected, if you use that language, again, I apologize, but infected by this truth that we're proclaiming. I just think that's beautiful. I think about the passage in Peter's first letter. So 1 Peter chapter 3, I think around verse 15, where he's talking about dealing with hardship and dealing with suffering and those sorts of things. And then in the middle of it, there's a car driving by. I'm totally normal, don't worry. Totally normal, don't worry about me. He stops in the middle of this encouragement that he's offering for people that are suffering, for Christians that are suffering. And he injects these couple of lines where he says, always be prepared to have an answer for anyone who asks you about the hope that you have. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you about the hope you have. And the hope there he's talking about is the hope in Jesus, of course. What's really interesting about that to me is he's saying, one, be prepared. So yes, we need to be prepared to give an answer, of course. But also he says, be prepared when anyone asks you. So the underlying assumption there is that you're living a life that is so out of the ordinary, it's so out of step with everyone else around you. It is so hopeful in the midst of everyone else's despair that people ask you about the hope you have. Has anybody ever asked you about the hope that you have? Not many people ask me about that, especially the past few weeks. Maybe that says more about me than it does about them. I think I have to be more purposeful about the ways that I'm living. And not just so that I can put on a show, and not just so that I can, try to spread an idea or anything like that, but because I really do believe the truth of the gospel. I really do believe that we have hope in the midst of despair, that we as the church are, as Jesus calls us, the light of the world, a city on a hill. It's interesting to me that we have to live a life that causes people to ask us about that hope. That we have to do ministry that causes people to ask us, why in the world are you so hopeful in the midst of difficult times? Why do you love people so much? It's a challenge to us, I think, and I hope it's a challenge for you. So, I should have said this at the beginning of the video, I apologize, but you can go to the item description. We're going to go this way because they're weed eating. You can go to the item description or the video description at the bottom of this screen. And in that description box, just click the little arrow and there will be a link to a PDF. And I'll do that PDF and we'll just reflect on the words of 1 Peter. And think a little bit more intentionally about our own lives. Are we living lives, one, that reflect hope? And are we prepared to talk about it? But two, are we living in such a way that even causes anyone to ask us if we're hopeful? What a challenge for us today, especially in difficult times. Many of us are suffering. Many of us are struggling through this. But people in the church have always struggled, and they've always had different things, maybe not pandemics, but they've always had different things to struggle with, and it was no different for the Christians that were receiving the words of Peter in the first century. So I hope you're encouraged by that. And I hope you remember that the truth that you have, that the faith that you have should be contagious. That the people around you should not be able to help themselves, but to buy into the hope that you have. It should be that powerful. It should be that widespread. It should be on our tongues and on our lips at all times. It should be just kind of oozing out of every single aspect of our life. It should be that all-encompassing, and it should spread that quickly. It's a powerful word for us, and I hope that you feel the same way. So dear friends, again, I want you to stay safe. I know it's difficult, especially as we're starting to do a little bit more reopening, but we're having a little bit more freedom now, which is awesome. But remember to stay safe. Remember to stay home unless you absolutely need to get out. And remember to do everything in your power to stay in love with the God who has saved you and claimed you and redeemed you. The God who has given you hope in the midst of every single circumstance. So may God bless you and keep you until we're able to meet again. Amen.